And then, oh, nice bit of robotic voice if you ever missed that in your life. So we're going to record the session. And then if we're happy with this, we might upload it to YouTube. We'll see how it goes. But without further ado, I would like to introduce the fantastic two speakers we have, Philip and Paul. Because the key thing is that there's really exciting jobs currently posted on the civil service website for Psychs, especially if you're interested in assessments, starting from the entry level to quite senior level. So you can take your pick what's right for you in your career journey. But I always kind of found it really interesting, considering civil service is probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest employer of all Psychs, to find out a little bit more from the inside how it's to work there. And I could not think of better people than Paul and Philip to share with us their experiences of working in the civil service. So the way the event is going to go, Paul and Philip will introduce their journeys for 10 minutes each, and then we'll have half an hour for just free-floating Q&A. So hopefully whatever questions you had will be answered, and the event will be worthwhile, be you in South London or south of France. I hope you're at south of France, Kerry. So excellent. Without further ado, Philip and Paul, over to you.
I'll kick off, Paul, if that's okay, and just give a little bit of an insight into my journey, but in particular steer it towards the opportunities that are in the civil service. For those who are less familiar with the civil service, what it is, it's basically a set of departments which support the government of the day, and that's across many areas of education or transport or foreign policy, environmental issues, and so on. So really anything that you can imagine that's presented in news programs will be touched on by the civil service, and the work we do is very relevant to all sorts of things, like currently obviously the COVID challenges, and previously Brexit, and all manner of other areas which are very significant in all of our lives. And that's one of the exciting things about being in the civil service, that you get that range of sort of connection with those really important and very topical areas. Within that, we have our occupational psychology service. So at the moment, I'm leading the consultancy arm of the OPS, Occupational Psychology Service, and I also have some other areas of work. So I'm actually also very involved in the emerging talent or entry talents stage of things, which we mostly are known for in terms of the Fast Stream scheme, which is the graduate program, which brings in around 1,000 graduates every year. And I'm very involved in the assessment design and also the D&I space, so the diversity and inclusion elements. And it's fascinating work, really. I mean, it covers all areas of the talent pipeline, from schools and college, apprenticeships, T-levels, diversity internships, the graduate program, and then beyond into senior roles. So that's part of what I do. The OPS is a specific area of actually engaging with our sort of technologies and professional expertise to make it happen in terms of getting the right talent and developing that talent, and supporting them in people in different ways, departments in different ways. And I'm also involved in learning and development as well in the emerging talent space, about sort of establishing the curriculum and the way in which people are developed once in role. So it's pretty hectic, but I'm, one of my favorite areas is very much the OPS side of things. Being an occupational psychologist, which is what I've been doing for many years now, since I left university. I left Nottingham University and found a role with SHL, Sutherland Holdsworth Limited, and I'm sure most of you will be very familiar with that that consultancy, providing sort of psychometric services, and I spent there a few years there. I did a quick, brief input with Capita, who are still very much alive and well in the public sector area in terms of some of the outsourcing work that they do. And then I spent a little bit of time as acting head of psychology with Greater Manchester Police, which was all about, again, assessment, but lots of diversity areas, some OD areas in terms of team development and managing change. And then I switched over to another public sector body, which was the London Fire Brigade, which has a pretty healthy occupational psychology arm agency, which again looks at selection and assessment, but has a lot of focus on diversity and inclusion, and is really focused on ethnic minority inclusion, and also disability and every other area of diversity. And that was a really good exposure to so many issues and challenges, and then I fed my expertise I sort of developed at that point to be chief psychologist in the fast stream world, which is the graduate program, as I mentioned, and then started on this area of assessment design with the fast stream process, and then also in respect to lots of diversity areas. I oversee, for example, at the moment, the quite large scale internships which are run in the fast stream area in the civil service. OPS, though, is a specific area, and it brings into play lots of really interesting areas. We obviously are very focused on assessment, as a lot of psychologists are, in terms of making sure that we're delivering best practice assessment, leading edge assessment, and Paul can give some really good insight into sorts of technologies we've been using, but obviously lots of digital, lots of virtual activity. Of course, using a very much evidence-based approach, and that's something we pride ourselves on in terms of really making sure we have the very best analysis of in terms of design, in terms of evaluation, making sure that D&I, diversity and inclusion, is completely embedded in the work we do, but looking beyond that, looking beyond just assessment towards things like leadership. So I've been working with colleagues on developing a leadership framework for senior civil servants recently, relating to pay as well, capability pay, and also some interesting projects such as psychological safety. So psychological safety is all about, do you feel comfortable to voice your opinions? Do you feel belonging within the work that you do? And to what extent do you feel you can be yourself? Can you be authentic? And we've been doing some quite significant detailed work on that in respect to focus groups, interviews, surveys, and then obviously bring it all together to make recommendations. And that brings us to the roles, the posts. I think probably we'll say more about that as we go through, but I can just sort of give you a taster that we've got, as you may have seen, a number of roles, a number of opportunities, some senior psych opportunities where you'll take quite a senior level and quite an independent input into managing projects, and developing, some really good outputs. Hopefully, we can give you some more insight into sorts of projects that have been done. But the quality is really good. I can say that confidently. And then we have our higher psychologist role as well, which is exciting because we're bringing in people who maybe have less experience, who are maybe starting their career journey in the OxPsych world, who can be developed, evolved, and hopefully progress within the civil service. I won't say any more about the other two roles, which Paul will be able to describe in a lot of detail, but I'll hand over to Paul now. But hopefully that gave you a little flavour of myself and the work we're doing. Are you there, Paul?
Good question.
There's my first mistake. I didn't realize I was on mute still. So there you go. Thanks, Phil. So yeah, hi everyone. I'm the deputy head alongside Phil of the Occupational Psychology Service. In terms of like my background then, so I studied at Hull University for my degree and master's, and unfortunately, sadly, Hull doesn't offer a master's in occupational psychology anymore, which is a real shame because it was an excellent course. And that was in the late 80s, early 90s. When I graduated, it was at quite a difficult time in the economy. So you took the opportunities where you could. I started with in a clinical psychology department, actually, working to develop a proposition for career counselling and career development support for staff in a hospital that was shutting down as part of community care. So some people on the call may know about the move to community care. Then I moved to one of the largest civil service employers of occupational psychologists, what was the Employment Service, which is now Job Centre Plus, to support people who have a disability, who looking to get back into the workplace. So understanding what their strengths were, understanding where they may need some adjustments and support, some career guidance support, assessment of their skills. Worked there for several years. And then in the early millennium, I moved to the Home Office, into a role that was really very strongly in the assessment domain. So working on plans to introduce assessment centres for promotion at two key levels in the Home Office. So I developed assessment centre products and supported their implementation through most of the early 2000s, and then a variety of different work. And I think I'd echo what Phil says about the opportunities for quite a varied CV that you can develop working in the public sector. Real opportunities to kind of broaden your experience for those who are starting out in their career. A really good opportunity to get involved in the kind of work that will enable you to become chartered. Real opportunity for that diversity of work, but also depth of the work as well. Then I moved into supporting delivery of staff surveys or people surveys, engagement surveys. And then latterly in the Home Office, I took over management of a Home Office specific leadership assessment for selection product, which was called Individual Psychological Assessment. Probably quite a different kind of product than what many occupational psychologists would typically kind of train up in or develop expertise in. So quite a niche area of occupational psychology. That product and service was developed up to the point when quite a lot of the psychologists were kind of heading towards the early 2010s now, who were working in HR kind of departments in the civil service, were brought together into a new expert service. And it's probably at this point where the Occupational Psychology Service as a cross civil service kind of entity first came into being. So occupational psychologists from a number of different government departments came together and began their journey in terms of providing cross civil service products and services. We are not a funded service, so we survive on the basis of developing and providing really high quality products and services to our across our civil service customer base. Phil's mentioned the excellent support we give to the fast stream graduate selection process, and also a lot of the other kind of talent pipeline kind of support that that we provide to various different customers. So we have heavily this year supported some key talent selection and development kind of programs for mid to senior level talent grades in the civil service, and then I would say around 2015, I personally took on leadership of the development of an online psychometric testing and assessment proposition for the civil service. And really, at the heart of that was the recognition that we could deliver our standardized testing and assessment services in quite a different way to how we had done. So as a psychologist, there was an opportunity to really take ownership of quite a large responsibility area on behalf of many multiple government departments and agencies as customers. And at the heart of it was the notion that the civil service could become its own test publisher. So rather than relying on what were very good services provided by external test suppliers, we could actually do it ourselves and do it to as good high quality, but probably do it quite a lot more cost effectively. Plus, we would have a lot more control over what we do. So there was a real opportunity as a psychologist to really kind of take a really high level of responsibility and ability to shape the direction of new products and services for our customers. So I've been leading that for the last 5 or 6 years. And just to say something about the future of the occupational psychology service, we are a fairly small but perfectly formed team, but we do have quite strong ambitions to grow the size of the team and to grow the footprint of the impact of our work across the civil service. As you can see with our recruitment, we've been given the freedom to grow the size of the team, but we still have those irons in the fire to grow the team even further. So we have got approvals to grow even further, but we want to do this recruitment, take stock, and then kind of work out what we want to do further in terms of growing that impact across the civil service. I'll just say something about the psychometrician roles. I'd be very interested to hear where the people that are on the line, where people are interested, whether it's in the higher psychologist kind of trainee range, whether it's in the more experienced senior psychologist range, and also the interest in the more focused, statistically oriented roles of psychometricians, and we've got a mid-level and more senior level role available there. But in terms of I'll say something about the psychometrician roles. This is a real opportunity for mid-level and more experienced level psychometricians to lead the way in the development of our online testing and assessment offer. So, opportunity to lead the building and testing of prototype and new tests, with new content, leading the whole development from start to finish of a test. We're really keen on understanding the the space for innovation of new tests. Now, for some of you, the idea of branching SJTs might not be that innovative, but for us, developing some branching SJTs recently has been a real eye opener for us in terms of the candidate or user experience. We want to develop our expertise in delivery of computer adaptive IRT based tests, developing more linear on the fly tests, as well as sticking with fixed and linear kind of tests. We work as a multidisciplinary operation in the service, particularly on the testing side. So we work very closely with digital experts. In fact, we kind of manage the delivery of our work in an agile way, very much in partnership with our digital colleagues, and we really believe in that multidisciplinary approach. Expertise isn't just lodged within one specialism. Real opportunity to research and develop new approaches, understandings. I think Phil's talked about evaluation, both in terms of design and evaluating the success of things, but really interested in researching new ways of doing things and demonstrating insights into current and future recruitment practices. And we're really committed to a really good user experience. We're not here to develop quick and dirty things. We're really here to really understand what the user need is and to develop really strong, accessible experiences for our users across all of our portfolio. I could go on, but I'll stop and hand over to Nikita.
Oh, thank you for that, Philip and Paul. I mean, that was just perfect. I'm just quite excited to hear about Philip's journey across so many different parts of the kind of police, fire brigades, and now the civil service. And it all started back from uni. And Paul, it's fantastic to hear that you brought this function in-house, and now you have the ability to develop products for long-term use rather than, what's hot this season. And that's brilliant to hear. And the amount of data you must be analyzing and constantly improving your products that this gives you must be quite tremendous. And there's definitely different ways to get you stuck in. So now we're going to open to questions. So the way it's going to work, just you can either stick your hand up or you can start your video and raise your hand if you want the old-fashioned way. And then we'll just take questions and see how discussion evolves. But from my side, I'll kick off. What I'm most curious about, what would be your advice to applicants who are applying to the civil service? What should they include in their cover letters or CVs? So what do you particularly feel they should focus on?
I'll just say a few words, if I may, and Paul will have some thoughts, I'm sure. I think, first of all, like any role, we want people who are motivated to be occupational psychologists, obviously, but also have the values that align with the civil service. So we're very keen to get the right match. So the values that we espouse are things like objectivity. We talked about evidence-based activity, and also honesty, integrity, impartiality. So those values are very important as a starting point. So it'd be great to have people who are keen on the public sector, on the civil service. Most people who come into the civil service are very much keen to give something back, to make a difference in the public sector space. So it's not just any sort of random occupational psychology context. It is very specifically around that, to support the public ultimately and make a difference in different department areas. So hopefully you've got that rationale, that focus, and then obviously it's about the type of role that you're keen on and demonstrating your motivation around that. And we obviously have a number of different elements towards the selection process. So we're looking for people who've got the capacity to deliver products, obviously in the occupational psychology space, albeit with supervision and support if you need that help. Communication skills, capacity to deliver and capture sort of the key elements of the work you're doing, both in terms of writing, but also obviously engaging others, working with stakeholders, working with clients, to really understand their needs, to deliver what their needs are, and to deliver it in a sort of prompt way to meet the timeline that they have, and to make sure that the final product is at the right quality, of course. So it's quite a challenge in that sense. There's as you would have in most occupational psychology roles, but really there's so much reward about making a difference in these different areas of government. So if you've got that focus, then absolutely that hopefully will be something that you can express. We have some tests within the selection process, fairly relatively light touch tests, nothing too overboard. We want you to capture in the process some evidence around certain areas. We talk about certain behaviours, about reflecting, working together and delivering at pace and communicating. So that will be part of it. And the recruitment process kicks off with, as I say, some ability tests, and then you would also be asked to provide a personal statement, which sort of captures how you meet the role. And as I say, it's about your motivation for working in the public sector, for working in the civil service environment, and really wanting to achieve the sorts of values that we have, both in the civil service terms, but in the OPS terms, the psychology service terms, around, hopefully, wanting to achieve the very best practice in the occupational psychology world, to achieve evidence-based outcomes, and then also to evaluate in a way that looks at how successful has that been. Is the stakeholder that you're working with, are they comfortable? Are they pleased with the outcomes? Has it met their needs? So being able to capture that in terms of how you would meet those sorts of elements. And Paul has also mentioned the sort of the commercial element of wanting to cover our costs, which sounds maybe challenging, but actually we've been able to more or less do that on most occasions. And then ultimately, finally, there's an interview as well as a CV, I should say. You need to submit that, but there'll be an interview where we look at your qualities. So are you driven towards the civil service and what we do? Do you have obviously the technical qualities, and do you have some of those elements of people engagement, emotional intelligence to be really successful in the role? Paul, over to you. You've probably got more to say there.
Well, Phil, you've given a very fulsome overview of what we're looking for and the process. So thanks for saving me from doing some of that. I would say we're not just interested in psychologists. So we've got two roles, obviously, which are labelled psychometrician. Now, for these, if you are also a qualified psychologist, then that would be a bonus. But actually, being a psychologist is not a critical part of those two psychometrician roles. So if you look at the candidate brief for the roles, you'll see that we don't require to be a chartered psychologist or HCPC or anything like that. What we're looking for the psychometricians are a degree, obviously with a high statistical component. We're looking for a degree of programming skills. So being comfortable with syntax in SPSS would be a minimum, but also you may be an experienced R user or some other coding programming language. We are looking for people with really good knowledge of classical and item response test theories. We really want people with experience of high stakes computer-based assessment in practice, in delivery. You might have, well, we're looking for proficiency in a range of different IRT softwares. So, you know, things like Excalibur, WinSteps, other things. We're not fussy, but there are some particular softwares that we do actually use. But, you know, I think if you've got experience in one, you'll probably it'll be quite easy for you to pick up others. It would be good if you have experience managing large-scale research testing programs, things like norm trialing, you know, developing and trialing of tests, tests for recruitment, but also tests and assessments for certification or licensure. What's quite interesting is that we are going to be moving much more into a broader portfolio of testing and assessment kind of areas. So not just in the testing for selection or recruitment, but also testing for you know, testing of knowledge acquisition, that kind of thing. So we'll be moving in a much more kind of well-rounded testing and assessment area. I won't say any more on that unless people have got questions. A real bonus for us would be comfort, familiarity, experience with data visualization techniques for the psychometrician roles as well. But I'll hand over to Nikita for further questions.
Absolutely, and it's wonderful that you don't require an occupational psychology degree for the psychometric roles, so you have that flexibility. So if you're a geeky psychometrician and don't have OcPsych, don't worry, nobody's perfect. You're still very much welcome. So it's nice to have the open doors. So by the way, I just posted all the currently 4 roles you're recruiting for, as far as I understand. I just posted them on my LinkedIn, so that's, one sec. Oh, that's the danger of having your LinkedIn open. It beeps. So just in summary, there's a role, the more entry-level, higher occupational psychologist. Mm-hmm. Then you have the senior psychometrics analyst. Then you have the lead psychometrician. And then you also have the senior OcPsych role.
Yeah. So basically 2 OcPsych roles and 2 which is psychometrician. Absolutely. But obviously, if, as Paul was saying, if you've got OcPsych as well as being a psychometrician, that's a bonus. Absolutely.
Excellent. So, good people, any questions? Just feel free to unmute yourself and jump in.
Hi, Phil, Paul, and Nikita. Nice to see you and meet you. That's a very interesting talk. Just a very quick question. How often do you actually run these campaigns?
How often? We, as and when required, really. I suppose it's probably every. I mean, I've been in the role not that long, actually, probably just around a year, and we've run, obviously running this campaign now. We did try earlier in the year. We didn't, unfortunately, weren't able to identify a candidate. It wasn't as big as this campaign, but it was we couldn't identify a candidate, which is why we want to go out and really reach out and hopefully encourage applications, and especially now because we've got the higher role, which I think it will be enticing and exciting for a lot of people who are at the earlier stage of their career. So I think 1 to 2 years, Paul, although you've been in this space a bit longer than I have with OPS. So how would you summarize that bit?
I mean, I would say this is the biggest recruitment we've done for a while. It just to kind of it might help that whilst one of them is a senior psychologist role, we actually potentially want up to 3 people as well. So it's not that we're after 4 people. It may be more than that. But as I mentioned earlier, we do have the authority to do further recruitment But I think we just want to take stock from this before we decide where to go further. And the recruitment that we will do could include some more specialized roles again. So there could be occupational psychologists. There will definitely be more digital roles. There could be research focused roles. You know, a lot of that is still to be worked up, but there will definitely be further recruitments.
Wonderful. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I actually have a follow-up, if possible, probably two. Are secondment opportunities available?
Secondment. What would be the nature of the secondment? What sort of length would you be interested in?
I don't have anything in mind for the time being.
I'm
I'm just asking questions just in case in the future.
It's an interesting one. I suppose there's opportunities for shadowing, I think. In terms of secondments, we haven't done that much recently, have we, Paul? Unless you can recall something.
I mean, I'd have to check the rules because there's always rules for these things, but I think we could take people on loan from other government departments. I don't know where you're coming from. We'd have to check the rules. Secondments from the private sector, I think, probably would be a bit more challenging.
Yeah, I meant a loan.
Okay.
I can probably take that one off.
Well, we can take that away to check.
Yes, thank you. And I guess a final question that I have. Are most of the roles focused on recruitment and developing psychometrics, diversity and inclusion, and I think it was learning and development, or do you have scope for including other areas such as employee well-being, organizational change? I know, Philip, you mentioned something about OD as well.
Yeah.
Just because that's my area of interest more than assessment and recruitment.
Indeed. I think it's true to say that it's something that can evolve quite easily. I mean, a lot of the work we do is really constrained by our resourcing. You know, if we had more resource available, then of course you can then expand and then start to build those opportunities. I mentioned psychological safety recently, so that was a project that probably we haven't done much of recently, but it's one that I'm overseeing at the moment, and that's very much linked to well-being, to diversity and inclusion, to obviously the whole space of authenticity and other areas like that. So we probably haven't done that much recently around change and some of those areas. Well-being certainly is embedded in a lot of what we do. It's so interlinked with D&I and so on. But yeah, it's really about opportunity. We're very open, Paul, would you say, to sort of expand and broaden?
I mean, what I would say here is that it's definitely in our strategic plan to try to be a more balanced across the different areas of occupational psychology kind of service. And it's not really a funding or budget kind of issue. It's more that we probably were a bit of a victim of success in terms of our testing assessment offer. So, you know, we have customers who really value what we do in the assessment space, and we've done obviously a really good job in that space. But then it obviously becomes quite difficult to try to start pulling away a bit from those expectations from customers, to prioritize our resource into other areas of occupational psychology. So I think we're definitely pushing at an open door in that space. It's just whether some of our customers are pulling us back into the assessment space. But I think with committed, you know, dedicated new staff as psychologists who want to carve out a niche in that area, there would definitely be opportunities to do that.
Thank you very much.
And thank you so much, Diana, for your questions. I can see Samantha and Kerry and Darnell have hands up. I believe, Samantha, you were the first one with your hands up. So over to you. Just feel free to unmute yourself.
Thank you.
Hello, hi, Paul and Philip. Thank you so much for your talk. It's really interesting. I'm a psychology graduate with some experience in HR before my degree. I'm interested in human resources and also occupational psychology, but I'm unsure at the moment which route to take. And so I wanted to get some more experience in the industry before committing to an occupational psychology master's. So I just had a couple of questions. Just wondered if you have any advice for me as to how to maybe explore these two different areas. And also, I was sort of looking at the HR Fast Stream program in the civil service. So I was wondering sort of when applications open, because I couldn't find that online, and if you'd have any advice for me when applying for the scheme.
Yeah, that's a good one. I can answer that directly because I'm very involved with that area. With HR Fast Stream, that is a program that's one of the 15 schemes within the portfolio of Fast Stream. And it tends to have around 60 or so opportunities most years, or maybe slightly more sometimes. It's a great scheme because it offers CIPD qualification within the elements of the program, and it will be advertised from the 23rd of September for about a month. So if you're interested, please just go to the website. As you say, it's not quite, the website isn't quite finalized for this year. It will be very soon. It's been updated and rebranded and so on. So you'll get some more information and clarity if you go onto the website in probably a week or two. And it's a very exciting scheme. And there are other schemes as well you might want to consider. But HR Fast Stream is one that is a great opportunity for those with a psychology background, or indeed an HR background, obviously, that you can really pursue a lot of really interesting HR challenges through that scheme. It's about 3 years itself as a program, so I would thoroughly recommend it as an opportunity. In terms of just the more general point about deciding between Oc Psych and HR, I mean, to some extent you don't need to necessarily choose. You can sort of maybe start with HR and have a look at Oc Psych, or the other way around. I know people who've certainly moved across one to the other because there's obviously so much overlap. And maybe that's a way forward for you. Otherwise, I think it's maybe just having a chance to just shadow somebody for a short period of time, chatting through what they do in the HR world. If you're connected in that world, or the Oc Psych world, which obviously we're very much involved with, so that may be a route for you. Yeah.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And I just want to add to that. If you're interested in any area of psychology or HR, LinkedIn is a brilliant platform. You can just search for it. Like, I don't know, you can search for well-being of firemen. And I'm sure you're going to find somebody who does this for a profession. And more or less, we're a friendly bunch. Just write to the person like, I'm really interested in well-being of firemen. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you do? And most people will say, sure, because people love to talk about themselves. One of the reasons we have a profession. And I would highly recommend this. Doesn't matter how geeky you think it is, like, people specialists in trust between the airline pilots. I'm sure there's some human factors guys who do that. So I would just really recommend use LinkedIn to your full advantage here. Any other questions, Samantha?
No, I think that's covered everything. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Carrie, over to you.
Well, thank you both, Philip and Paul. I appreciate your time and sharing your experience with us. Sorry, I'm gonna have to keep my video off. I think my internet is a bit shaky. But I am a career changer, and it's a bit tricky because my background is all hospitality, so I'm loaded with soft skills and dealing with challenging situations, shall we say. But I don't hold a lot of the experience that I'm seeing in some of the org psych job postings. I'm very heavy on learning and development, and I'm truly passionate about that and motivation and engagement. And so I was looking at the entry-level position you have posted and was wondering, I guess, in a way, sort of what my chances would be coming in for some of these quote-unquote entry-level positions without some of the background that I think you all might be looking for, especially since I have not a lot of quote unquote selection and assessment, and it's really down to recruitment and then development of people, if that makes semantic sense.
Did you want to pick up that, Paul, perhaps?
No, you happy for you to do it, Phil?
Okay, thank you. It's an interesting one. May I check, do you have, I presume you have a first degree in psychology, do you? And do you?
So I don't. So I actually hold 2 bachelors. I hold one in acting and performance, yay for me, and then the second in hospitality management. And I'm finishing my MSc in org psych from Birkbeck.
Oh, you are. Wonderful. So you're actually, yeah, so you've gone down that road. Okay, that's wonderful. So that's the first point. Obviously, you want to make sure that that's achieved, and then it's reaching out. I mean, Nikita sort of gave some indication there about using LinkedIn or other platforms to build a network. I would. I mean, it is about experience, and you sort of identified maybe that you need to develop a little bit more exposure and experience. One of the best routes often is something like, you know, the networking opportunities, which you're probably incredibly good at given your background, to start to look at events. There are increasingly face-to-face events, you know, in terms of the Psych world. There's the Division of Occupational Psychology events. EWOP is coming up next year, for example, and then ABP. Am I allowed to say that? I'm not sure, but anyway, it's the Association for Business Psychology, and that is another great source of individuals who might be able to network with and ask about their background and opportunities, and just a chance to maybe see if there is a chance to engage in projects, or at least shadow or something like that. So it's starting to make those connections on social media, but ideally, you know, even more than that, maybe events that you may attend, and perhaps start to build those connections, and perhaps start not necessarily in the Oxide world if it's a challenge to get those opportunities, but go into the HR world, which we were talking about earlier, or maybe some other sort of similar sector, and see what's available. And move from there. But I think, you know, the fact that you're maybe have got those soft skills, as you put it, might actually be a really good starting point. And those soft skills are absolutely, you know, beneficial in so many ways as an occupational psychologist, of course. And you can use those. And it's about your unique skills. What are the things that you can sell and really make connections with, and that people want to see in people they work with. Hopefully that gave you some idea, but that's it is starting to build up that portfolio of experience, if you can.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Because it seems as though my skill set seems to walk that line between org psych and HR, especially since learning and development always kind of flows into both, and employee engagement flows into both. And the challenge that I'm specifically finding is that because I've already led and developed and implemented training programs and strategies, I'm not quite entry level in that area, but then I'm not quite management level when it comes to specifically org psych L&D. So it's this marsh of which way to turn.
I mean, one of the things I would definitely, I haven't mentioned it, but there's the civil service job site. There's an incredible array of opportunities, not necessarily in Oxide world, but there are obviously some, but in the sort of learning development space, HR space. Have a look at the portal, and you'll see that, you know, go into different departments or search on you know, learning and so forth, and see what might be there for different levels of role. I'm very involved in L&D myself, and we are redeveloping our L&D program for the graduates coming through, and it's a very interesting, challenging area. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And if you ever need some help on a shadow for that project, let me know.
Link in at some point, and we'll have a look. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just wanted to say that, Kerry, it's great you have the soft skills and transferable skills. Also look at facilitation and coaching, because there's also Psych consultancies which deliver facilitation training, given qualifications in psychometrics, all of that. And actually having the soft skills and ability to work the room and deal, as you mentioned, with challenging situations, as far as I remember, can be really beneficial to have that.
Absolutely. And may I just go back to the idea of the ABP, Association for Business Psychology. They actually probably are a better match in some ways than DOP, which tends to be slightly more sort of focused on the sort of evidence and academic space, rather than some of those areas like coaching that Nikita mentioned. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's definitely a lot to choose from. Plus, psychologyatwork.blog will be launching the second year of our mentoring program in November. So if you need mentors and all of that to help you develop, it's all open. But I wish you the best of luck, Kerry. And now over to Darnell. And I can see, Lubaba, you also have a question. So we'll make sure these two are answered before we wrap up. Darnell, over to you. Oh, and we can sort of see your video, but now we can see it.
Laptop issues. Yeah, hi guys, and thank you both for your time.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm currently working in talent acquisition in a tech startup in London, fighting a bit of an uphill battle to try and get them to implement any sort of psychometrics. It's a strange one coming out of the course where it's like, oh, psychometrics are great and they make everything work well, and then it's presenting that information to people who haven't spent just a year learning about how quite useful they can be. So it's an interesting one. But so my question was sort of around, in both the context of like the application of psychometrics more generally, and also in the context of the higher occupational psychologist role, how far beyond like the initial, so I know there's like a set threshold in terms of like where you rank in the norm distribution, how far beyond that are the results considered? And is there any difference in weightings between the three, and both in the context of the role and more generally? How do you decide on these? I imagine it's like a very case-by-case basis, but what is sort of process behind that?
Interesting. Paul, did you want to explore that?
I'm sorry, I didn't really hear the first part of the question. So I heard the second part, but I wasn't quite sure what you were referencing. Sorry, could you repeat the first?
Yeah, so sort of in the context of both like the higher occupational psychologist role itself, and also in the application of psychometrics more generally, like how far beyond the initial threshold point, like the point where you've either passed or failed, sort of the different levels in that, how much are they considered in the application process?
Right, I'm with you. So the way we have set the tests up, and they are actually our tests, so we develop them, is it gives us the option to just use the minimum standard that we set on them, or raise the standard if we need to. So if we were embarrassed with a large volume of high quality applications, which would be fantastic if that happened, we do have the option of raising the minimum standard. But I think probably in reality, these are fairly hard to fill roles. So we will probably find that we're just talking about the minimum standard, and on these tests, the minimum standard is, should obviously for the majority of people be something they can achieve. And given the nature of these roles, I would kind of expect that we'll have a slight surplus of people passing than what you might normally find, just because of the backgrounds of people that we're looking for. Because many jobs in the civil service don't require a degree, for example.
Yeah, so is the norm group for those sort of set just much more widely than sort of like specific applicants to particular roles?
Yeah, so it's a civil service wide norm for the level of the job that the test is being used at. Yeah.
Thank you.
I love those geeky questions. Thank you, Darnell. I never thought we'd get into norm groups, but hey, select and sample. Perfect. And last but not least, oh yeah, and Lynn as well. Lubaba, am I pronouncing the name correctly?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm sorry, I wouldn't be putting my camera on. You can imagine my face talking, well, not hallucinations type, but yeah, I don't have good internet connection at the moment. So thank you again for your time, Paul and Philip, and thank you for arranging this. I'm so glad to see this. So I have like a couple of questions. Just please ask me to stop if you feel I'm asking a lot of them. Firstly, I'll just give my background. So I did my bachelor's in psychology and my master's in occupational psychology and HRM. So it was a bi-major, and both were from here in Pakistan. I'm currently in Pakistan. And during my master's itself, I started doing jobs in HR because occupational psychology, unfortunately, is not a very famous area to work in over here. It's like very hard to find, and there are like a handful of jobs only available. So yeah, I just had to make my way through HR. When I finally landed a job, I'm currently working with the Commonwealth Secretariat in London. And so it's more of an L&D position that I'm working there with. And like needless to say, I'm loving my time that I've spent almost a year over there. However, now comes my second question, which is that just because in Pakistan I couldn't find more psychology related jobs, so I had two switches of jobs almost a year or within a year over here, and it's almost would be a year working with the secretariat. So it's just I feel I'm so keen on applying, but I'm just stopping myself because I don't want to be that labeled as that candidate who like jumps jobs. But I'm more interested and more inclined towards psychometrics. I even had a word with my manager, and he's like amazing. Um, and like he said that given the scenario what is there in UK, it's a bit it's easy from shifting from L&D to psychometric like careers, but it's difficult to no, sorry, I'm saying the other way around. So yeah, if like I have more experience in L&D and I go ahead in this, and then when I change, I will have to change into something which is more of a detailed assessment psychometric role. So it would be difficult for me to do that. Now that I'm early in my career, so it would be easy. However, if I, that would be the other way around. If I don't like my work in psychometric, and if I'd like to change to L&D sometime down later, it would be easier. So yeah, these are like, I'm not sure if it's more of a question or the scenario that I have. So if you could enlighten me on this.
It's really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of people now that you meet who are sort of moving between one area and the other, and that's quite normal now. It's quite an accepted approach, and I would not be shy in doing that. If that's really your passion is towards, say, psychometric areas, then that's great. Pursue that. What you would obviously want to do is to explain why you've made that shift or want to make that shift. What is it that's driving that? What maybe experience or what knowledge do you have in the psychometric area which is sort of pushing you towards that? That would be extremely helpful to justify the application and obviously help your application to sort of explain your motivation and to make that shift. And of course there's some benefit in both. You can actually use your L&D capability in the space of being a psychometrician, because you will inevitably have some L&D requirements in that role, there will be L&D, and in fact, it will make you a very powerful player if you can combine the two in terms of your skills in one and skills in the other. And you know, those shifts, those movements around are quite normal, and in fact are to be encouraged, because it's a much more engaging, exciting career if you can do that sort of variety and that change, perhaps when it feels right to do so. So I shouldn't feel reluctant to move if you feel that is the sort of progression that you want to pursue, and it's certainly worth trying if you wish to. Yeah.
All right, great. That answers it. Thank you so much, Philip. I have like one more question. I'm not sure if I have time, and I know we have exceeded the meeting time, but do you think like so I'm like very keen into going into neuroscience, and I was thinking of getting a PhD somewhere down the road. I'm currently actually even doing my CIPD level 7 diploma. So I was thinking once I'm done with that, I'll move into, you know, PhD in neuroscience. So do you think, given the psychometric passion that I have, would PhD in neuropsychology, neuropsychology, would that be more of a appreciated or value added thing in my CV, or do you think that's like too early to get that done?
I would say it's too early. I think it's an interesting area. It's obviously overlaps with psychometrics, overlaps with L&D, undoubtedly. It's all about the people, capabilities, behaviors, and so forth. So again, it's about your passion, what you're interested in, what you want to pursue. And if you want to find opportunities in that area, I'm sure you will. Obviously, they're quite limited, probably, on the whole, but undoubtedly, I'm sure the qualities, the skills that you develop if you did a PhD would be valuable in some area that's linked, whether it's necessarily neuroscience initially or not. But it's exciting, yeah, if you've got that opportunity, yeah.
Great. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And psychology is a vacation. It's a whole life affair. So the thing is, you might go from L&D to HR to psychometrics and neuroscience, and it's all connects because it's all about the human experience. So I would not cut yourself short. It's a long-term process, and the more richer and more diverse, the better. You might even then go to be a therapist later on. Who knows? That's what makes it so exciting. But thank you, Lubava, and I wish you the best of luck in your career. And just the last question from Lynn, and then we'll wrap up. Lynn, over to you.
Oh, hi. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, Lynn. Yeah.
Hello. I'm keeping with the group norm. I'm keeping my video off. My question is more around flexible working and how you're viewing working from home. I mean, I'm someone in particular that wouldn't be willing to move to London for any of the roles. So working from home, flexible working, and along with that, I'm someone more down the other end. So I'm not starting out. I'm someone who might be more thinking of a portfolio career. So working 2-3 days a week for one employer and then another day of the week for someone else. What would be your take on that?
Interesting. I mean, I'll just say a few words and then Paul, I'm sure, has a view. But may I ask where you're based, Lynn?
I'm based in Cambridge.
Okay. So you're not far from, if you had to come into London, that would be.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, that's something, you know, like once or twice a month, but I'm not someone, and other people might be in the situation where going into London 5 days a week wouldn't be viable for me.
Understand, of course, like most employers, we are moving eventually, not sure when, to a hybrid sort of format, probably asking people to come in for a couple of days, maybe 2 or 3 days a week. So that may not be exactly where you want to be, but that's probably where the civil service is going. At the moment, almost everybody who's not doing operational roles anyway is working from home. I've like most people, been doing that for 18 months or so. So it's sort of moving around a bit, and we'll expect people to some extent to come in to the office if possible. Generally, flexible working is absolutely endorsed and promoted in the civil service. It's one of the wonderful things about the public sector, that flexible working is achieved. Absolutely not quite sure about the portfolio element, how that would work. Are you familiar, Paul, with people who might have that sort of more than one role within the sort of working week?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd echo what Phil's saying about we've been in a grand experiment for the last 18 months, haven't we? And most of us in office-based jobs have been working from home in that time, and doing it really effectively, I would probably add as well. But there will be an expectation going forward that we do spend more time in the office. Exactly how that will play out, we're not sure yet. I mean, in terms of the team, I mean, our team is actually scattered across the whole of the UK, and given the location strategy for the Cabinet Office, I can only think that scattering is going to happen even more. So the notion that there's some benefit in dragging some of us into one office versus working remotely, I think it still needs to be tested. But that we can't get away from the fact that will be the expectation, that we do come in the office. In terms of like having more than one job, I don't think in principle that's a problem. I mean, if somebody wants to work part-time with us, we would be open to that kind of offer. Obviously, there could potentially be conflicts of interest with what the other role is, what kind of organisation it is, that we'd have to be careful about, and obviously availability as well. So we will need some degree of confidence around availability, and so if the demands of the other job interfere with the demands of this job, then obviously that could potentially be an issue as well. But in principle, I think we're very open to a portfolio existence. It sounds very attractive, doesn't it, having a portfolio existence? I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I just sort of just thinking out loud, because I wasn't particularly looking, but you got me thinking, and I just intrigued to know about your sort of if you like, working culture there, your working practices. That's great. Thanks very much, Paul and Philip.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I believe some of these roles allocate, you can choose between different offices like Glasgow, Edinburgh, York, and London.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So there's quite a bit of flexibility. Well, thank you everybody for the questions. And just before we wrap up, Philip, Paul, any words of wisdom you would tell to your younger self when you just graduated uni about having a career in Occ Psych? Anything you wished you knew back then, apart from like validity coefficients?
I think it's a career that's sort of what you were saying earlier, Nikita, that it evolves, it's not set. You can develop your own interests, your own passions, and you can create the career you want to some extent. So I'm doing certain areas like well-being and psychological safety that you sort of go into and you start to get interested in and start to develop, or obviously psychometrics and assessment and everything else. So you find those opportunities. The broad range of variety is wonderful, and I would just, to sell the civil service a little bit, it's an incredible organisation. The variety of areas of work is so good and so strong in terms of all the areas, education, environment, the economy, and everything else. I would recommend it strongly, and I hope that people on this call will apply. We'd love to see you do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Paul?
Just from me, giving advice to my earlier self, I think probably don't think of it as a job title. Think of it as a skill set. Think of it as a mindset. recognize that, you know, your career will move in a whole range of different ways depending on what your personal interests are. There are loads of opportunities, and not, I would say to myself, don't think of it as this kind of linear thing. Think of it as a thing that weaves around, very multifaceted. You may not work as a psychologist in job title in all of your kind of career roles, but you'll definitely retain the skill set and the mindset. So that's what I would say to myself.
Fantastic. And it is about the skill set you develop, and it's not about the job title. I mean, just when you search for occupational psychologist, you'll get 2 or 3 roles. If you search for occupational psychology, there you get dozens of roles, which mentioned that an MSc would be beneficial. And just back to Philip's point, yeah, because I think ultimately what we need to make a decision, which is not told about an MSCs, is who profits from our efforts as an Psych. Is it shareholder value, or is it general public good? And I think what civil service offers, which I don't think anybody else offers to the same extent, is using occupational psychology for public good. It's like, as Paul mentioned, to bring in psychometrics in-house and select the best people for civil service, and to give the best return on investment. And then you end up being the victim of your own success, because you have different functions coming to you, and the ability to scale that impact across all of civil service and British society as well. And that's just so impressive. And as Philip mentioned, you know, everything from well-being to psychological safety, just on that scale, all for the public good. Just kind of think of other opportunities which would present you to use Psych for so much goodness. So thank you, Philip and Paul. And thank you everybody for your wonderful questions. And the roles are up online, and do watch the space. And there's also a civil service website and fast streams that was mentioned. So do check it all out. And if you have any questions, Philip, Paul, are you happy for people to connect with you via LinkedIn?
Please, I would love to.
Definitely, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Excellent. And thank you, everybody, and hopefully see you around. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Nikita.
Thank you.
Nikita. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.